All right, dear friends. Good evening. And we are beginning a new chapter of Tanya. Not just a new chapter of Tanya, but a brand new segment of Tanya. Chapter 35, chapter 36, and chapter 37. 3 chapters we got going over here. And these 3 chapters they're unbelievable chapters. They really, really are. They're going to take us to a whole nother level of depth. These 3 chapters are considered some of the most revolutionary, some of the most transformative chapters of Tanya. We got big stuff going on over here. But one of the things that are going to be happening, and the way the author is going to ease us into this brand new topic, is by asking 2 questions. And these are both big, piercing questions that really touch the very, very essence of Judaism, what it means to be a Jew. And what these 2 questions really, really get down to is a question of purpose. And purpose is, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Let me ask you a little question. I want to hear from you honestly. What would you consider more important to Judaism? What would you consider to be more fundamental to the Jewish experience? Jewish experiences of the soul or Jewish actions? Which one's more important? Meaning, is the emotions important? Having a certain sense of emotional connection, getting into a meditative space, becoming enlightened. Is that what Judaism is all about? Is that where the power of Judaism is? Or is the power of Judaism in the stuff that we do? You do a mitzvah. You could make a blessing, put on tefillin, light a Shabbos candle. Which one's more important? Is a spiritual experience more important? Or is simply doing stuff more important? Which one? What would you say?
Action.
Oh, Dr. Joel says action. Why do you say action?
Because when you do an action, you are changing the bad impulses to go. Bring you're mirroring to bring godly impulses, and and so the action is more important. Thought, speech, and action.
Thought, speech, and action is more important.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's more important. Why? Because it changes you, you're saying?
Well, no, because you're actually doing something to change the way God wanted the earth to be. He wanted to make it so that you could bring a God, that you could actually be aware of God in the Asiya earth.
So Joel, you're already taking us, you've already learned Tanya, you're taking us deep into this stuff.
I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. What's conventional wisdom? Conventional
wisdom?
Meaning, what do most people think? What would be a more meaningful experience? What would be a more important experience?
People think doing things like lighting candles and Shabbat, going to synagogue, and
most people would say that doing things is most important.
I think so. Yeah, I think.
Okay.
So.
Okay. What else? Any other thoughts? Which one's more?
I think
Go ahead, Hillary.
Spiritual.
You would say spiritual.
Yes, I think
like
so.
What?
Than a physical action.
Like
but
what?
They seem connected, actually.
Oh, they seem connected. Yeah, that's true.
They do seem connected. Because I think you feel spiritual when you are, like the example of lighting the Shabbos, candles, and everything.
So 1 second. Give me an example of like a spiritual experience. What do you mean by that? That would be more experience? Like what type of spiritual experience?
Oh, how would I describe a spiritual experience?
That you would consider to be most important.
Maybe like somebody passes away.
Okay,
and
somebody
pray, and well, I guess you're doing an action, because if you're praying or
You say about feeling something, getting into a space of feeling something.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts? What do you say? Spiritual experiences or physical activities? Which one would be more important?
I think spiritual is nice, but I think actions is where you can do a mitzvah.
Right, you could do a mitzvah, but on a personal level, which one is more? In which one do you feel more of a connection? Which one do you feel you're more connected to your Judaism? You're connecting more to God. You're connecting more with your soul.
It could be either.
Which means like this: which one is serving which? I want you to think about this. Do we do in order so that we can feel spiritual, or do we feel spiritual so like that we could do? Which one is serving what? What's the premise for what? What do you say?
Well, if you're, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think maybe thinking of it as like a hierarchy where at the lowest level is thought, the next level is speech, and the higher level is action.
Thought, speech, and action are all within the general category of action. I'm speaking about emotions or deep study or contemplation and meditation. That's more of an experience more than just a thought, speech, or action.
I think those, with the way you rephrase the question, that then those are the spiritual study, spiritual connections, what Yuval's doing. But it might be cyclical. I hear what Dr.
Oh, it's cyclical. You're right, cyclical. But which one is ultimately most important? Which one is a stepping stone for what? What's the point? Is the point so that we could be spiritual, so we do mitzvahs like that we could be spiritual? Or is the point to do mitzvahs so we try to be spiritual so like that we'll do mitzvahs? Which one is it?
A vicious circle.
What was that?
I said it's a vicious circle.
Hopefully it's not that vicious.
I'm not vicious, but I mean it's a circle. You know, you could use your spirituality to end up doing when let's say you're studying Torah.
But one second, which one is most important? I understand that each one feeds into the other, but which one is the point?
Which was most important?
Action.
On earth here, I would say the action on earth here. The action.
So you're saying you're the action? Hillary, the way that I'm phrasing the question now, what would you say?
I mean, I would still say spiritual.
You're saying I do a mitzvah like that, I could be spiritual, so I could feel spiritual.
Yes.
I also think spiritual, your connection to Hashem, and that's ultimate.
Right. You're saying you feel a spiritual connection. You feel an emotional bond. You get into a good space. Yeah. You know, there was a guy who came to one of my classes once, and I said something about doing mitzvahs. I don't remember exactly what triggered him. This was a good few years ago. And he stayed after class, and he was very upset. Like, he was very worked up about it. And he was saying, his argument is that the goal, a connection with God means spiritual, that you could sit and you could meditate and you could, you go to the woods and you sit and you meditate. That's spirituality. Mitzvahs are not spirituality. Mitzvahs are just things you do. It's just busy work. It's just stuff. He said, mitzvahs are for people who don't know how to be spiritual. That's what this guy was saying. Okay? I'm not saying I agree with him. You know, the point is to be spiritual. Some people, nebuch, don't know how to be spiritual. So we have mitzvahs to give them a filler. You know. But if you look at Judaism, you see clearly that the point of Judaism, what Judaism is, the experience of Judaism, is very much about action, doing stuff. Judaism is not about trying to get yourself into a spiritual space and to feel spiritually connected and to try to feel emotionally connected with God and to get yourself in a spiritual trance. This is not what Judaism is about. If you look at the mitzvahs, if you look at Judaism very, very much is put on tefillin today. Light Shabbos candles. Keep Shabbos. Keep kosher. This is Judaism. Judaism is about doing stuff. Now that's a little bit counterintuitive. It's a little bit counterintuitive. Because I think what most people would look at what a religion should be and what a spiritual path should be. It should be spiritual. It should be religious. It should be about faith. It should be about belief. It should be about feeling emotionally connected. Judaism, if you just look in the code of Jewish law, which tells a Jew what a Jewish life is meant to look like, meditation is not such a big part of it. The point is, do a mitzvah today, then do another mitzvah, and do the mitzvahs the way God wants you to do it. And that leads us to the question, what is up with action? Why is action so important? Now, I don't mean to downplay the role of spiritual internal development and trying to create an emotional connection, but at the end of the day, it's undeniable. Judaism is a religion that is hyper-focused on action. Do things, do things. And here's a very simple way to illustrate this. Imagine two Jews. It's Passover evening, Seder night. There's two Jews. One Jew is a Jew who knows nothing about Judaism. Let's say he's a college kid, does not come from a traditional Jewish home, barely knows it's Passover, but just that day, to his great luck, a Chabad rabbi stopped him, found out he's a Jewish kid, and said, come to my house tonight for dinner. He shows up, it's a Pesach Seder. He doesn't even know what a Pesach Seder is. And he's like, okay, we eat matzah tonight. And the guy's like, I don't want to eat matzah. And the rabbi's like, you got to eat matzah. That's the mitzvah, you got to eat it. And he pressures this kid into eating matzah. But the kid has no clue what he's doing. The kid has no clue why he's doing. The kid doesn't have any appreciation of anything. Eating matzah. So he did the action, but his heart, his mind, his soul, his spiritual, nothing is there. He's totally not invested in this. All he could think about is, when will this crazy rabbi let me go? Then take another Jew. All right, that's Exhibit A. Now let's go to Exhibit B. Exhibit B. You have a Jew who is a Jew who studies, goes to classes, is all excited. It's Passover. He invited all his friends and neighbors to join him for the Seder, and he's serving matzah, and he made and they're doing Nagada, and he prepared all the stuff he's going to talk about and discussion points, and he's really, really feeling it. And he understands the significance of matzah and what we're doing here at the Seder. Little technicality, he didn't actually eat matzah that night. He's running the Seder, and he feels that he was very spiritually connected. He happened to not eat matzah. So you have one Jew who ate matzah, but zero spiritual connection. You have another Jew, full-on spiritual, mental, emotional connection, but didn't actually do the act, didn't actually do the deed. Which one has the mitzvah? Which one does not have the mitzvah? Which one is in better shape?
The one that ate the matzah.
The one who ate the matzah, which is if you think about it, there's something pretty crazy to that. There's a Jew. He doesn't even know he's doing a mitzvah. Imagine there's a Jew who eats matzah on Passover night. He doesn't even know he's doing a mitzvah. By the way, all of you know, every single year before Pesach, I try to personally hand deliver to all of our friends shmur matzah. It's like that all of you could have. I visited a Jew in his office before Passover. This is 2 years ago. And I gave him the matzah. And I said, where are you going to be Seder night? So he's like, I don't know. What Seder night? So I gave him the date. He looks at his calendar. He's visiting his family in Florida, and they have a reservation at a restaurant Seder night. So this is not even a guy he's not doing a Seder. His family is not doing a Seder. He doesn't even know when the Seder is. Jewish guy, okay? So I asked him if he could do me a favor. When you go to the restaurant, bring the box of matzah with you. And make sure it's dark outside. And make sure that everybody eats matzah. So he said, sure. He took the box. He wrote the date on it that I told him was Seder night. Now, I don't know if he actually did it. I never followed up. I guess I was scared to hear the answer. That he didn't bring it with him to Florida. You know, here's a Jew who has zero appreciation for the Seder. He's not showing up for the Seder. He doesn't care. He's in a restaurant in Florida. It's not a kosher restaurant, don't worry. But if he eats matzah, he has the mitzvah. The mitzvah is that you should bite matzah with your mouth, chew it, and swallow it. That's the mitzvah. You could be a spiritually excited, mentally focused, you could be emotionally invested, you could feel that you have all this amazing ideas and understanding about the Kabbalah and the symbolism, why we eat matzah. And that's beautiful. But if you didn't eat the matzah, you have no mitzvah. Now what does that tell you? That tells you that Judaism, what is Judaism about? That Judaism is about that you eat the matzah. That's the Judaism. What you learned and what you understand and what you feel, that's wonderful and good, but that's the icing on the cake. Now, don't actually put any icing on your matzah. But right, according to Jewish law, you only fulfill the mitzvah of matzah if it's pure, unadulterated matzah. If you even put salt on it, it could be a problem. Okay, but in Judaism, action doesn't feed spirituality. The spirituality feeds the action. The point that we're trying to get to is the action. The mitzvah is what matters. The Alter is going to ask one simple question. Why? Why is that so important? We need to understand why mitzvahs are so important. What is the value of mitzvahs? Let's read. Chapter 35. This chapter I titled The Power of Action. Here we go. Part 1. What are we doing here? Says the Alter Rebbe, right? This is the first question. What's the value of action? Says the Alter Rebbe. Let's return to the theme of this book. The whole book of Tanya is based upon this verse. For this thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to do it. These are the final words of Moses, last will and testament of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our first Rebbe. He's about to pass on from his people, the first generation, the first leader of the Jewish people. And he gives his last words of encouragement and strength to the Jewish people. And he says, the Judaism that I gave to you, the Judaism that I brought to you from Sinai, it's very close to you. This is an accessible Yiddishkeit. It's close to you in your mouth and in your heart to do it. Okay, let's continue. By now, you understand that to fulfill all the mitzvahs out of love is not only close, but very close to you. A massive bulk of Tanya was about teaching you how the Yiddishkeit with an emotional connection, the Alter Rebbe taught you how it's close and even very close. But says the Alter Rebbe, we still require some explanation, however, on the words at the end of the verse to do it. Let's understand the final words of the verse, that Judaism is to do it. Why such emphasis on the doing, as opposed to the sense of love as its own value? Why is Judaism so into action? That's the question. They say a story. There's once a man sitting in the park bench in Manhattan, right? Central Park, right? Is that what it's called? Central Park? And he's watching and he sees two city workers. They show up in a little car, in a city car. Two city workers with their vests on. And they're both holding shovels. Guy number one takes a shovel, hits the ground, pulls out some dirt, makes a little hole. As soon as he's done, guy number two shows up right behind him, takes the dirt, puts it right back into the hole. All right, they walk a few more feet. Guy number one digs up, guy number two puts it right back in. And they're walking around the park, and there's a guy sitting on the park bench, and he's watching this insanity. And he says, whoa, what in the world's going on over here? Eventually, he can't hold back his curiosity. He walks over to them and says, what's the matter with you people? I'm watching already for a half hour. You're sitting there, you're shoveling. One guy shovels, one guy puts it back. What are you doing? So the workers say, you don't understand. We're really supposed to be a 3-person team. Guy number one shovels, makes a little hole in the ground. Guy number two puts a little seedling, a little tree, in that hole. And guy number three takes the dirt and packs it back in to keep the seedling in its place. But guy number two didn't show up today, so here we are. Okay, now, what's the joke about? The joke is really about government bureaucracy and how government ends up just becoming, right, like this is typical. You're paying somebody to do it, so that's it, they do it. But it's also a little bit of a deep commentary on how we maybe sometimes feel about Yiddishkeit. Why are we doing this? we're Jews already for more than 3,000 years. So I put on tefillin, and I light Shabbos candles, and I keep kosher, and I'll put up a mezuzah. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? Or is it just what we call, it's called busy work. I'm just being busy, right? What do they say? Tradition! It's just tradition! Why am I doing it? I don't know! It's tradition! The Alter Rebbe wants us to understand, what is Judaism all about? What is this really about? It's just tradition? It's just, hey, God wants it to be busy. So shovel and then put it back, and no one cares, whatever. It doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're doing something. Is Judaism real? Is there value? What is this over here? Or is it just tradition? Yeah, it doesn't have to make sense. It's tradition. It is what it is. It's nice. We enjoy gefilte fish. They say a joke that there was a Jewish family. The mother of the family said, she taught the family that whenever they would make a fish for Shabbos, they would always take the front of the fish and chop off a big chunk, chop off the end of the fish, a big chunk, and they would only bake only the middle of the fish. And the rest they would throw away in the garbage. Okay, why do they do it? She said, this is the tradition in our family. We cut off the top and the end of the fish. At one point, the family got older. The oldest girl got married. The son-in-law comes into the family, and he sees what's going on. He says, why are you doing this? He says, this is tradition. He says, what do you mean this is tradition? It's ridiculous. You're throwing away a good piece of fish from the beginning and the end. So you say, listen, this is tradition. If you have questions, go to grandma. She's the one who taught us this tradition. And the mother says, when I grew up in grandma's house, this is what we did it to. I'm not changing tradition. This is what it is. So son-in-law goes to grandma. She's already in her older years. And says, Grandma, what's up with this tradition? So she says, tradition? It's not a tradition. When we grew up, we had a very small oven. The whole fish wouldn't fit in. So we had to chop off a little bit from the top and a little bit from the end in order to get it in. It's not the Alter Rebbe says we have to understand what Judaism is all about. Why are we doing these things? Do these things even matter? What are we trying to accomplish? Yiddishkeit is about a mitzvah. That's what it really is all about. And maybe it's one of the hardest things of Judaism for people to really get used to, that we take mitzvahs very seriously. Like even the details of a mitzvah, the slightest thing off in a mitzvah could invalidate the mitzvah. Like if it's just tradition, who cares? It's a kosher sukkah, it's not a kosher sukkah, but it looks good, it has the flavor. Listen, we have to understand, we really have to understand, what is the value of Judaism? And we have to understand the value of Judaism. Understand the value of Judaism is very important. I'll tell you one more story before we continue on. This is a Hasidic metaphor that's given. A little bit of a Hasidic illustrational story. There's once a king who was traveling. Kings would always travel to go see their land, to see what's happening in their kingdom. And the king is traveling through the countryside, through the fields, and he chances upon a field, and he sees the farmer. And the farmer is working hard. He's there with his tools, and he's chopping the flour, and he's chopping the corn, whatever he's doing. And the king was so taken by the hard work and the dedication and the grace of the movements of this farmer. He was just really entranced by it. So he asked the servants to go fetch the farmer for him. And the farmer comes to the king's carriage, and the king makes a request. The king says, I would like to know if you can move to the palace. I want you to leave the whole farm behind. I'll pay you so much money, you'll never even imagine you'll make so much money. What I want you to do, he says, I'm so impressed by your hard work, by your diligence, by your dedication, and by the grace of your work, the movements of your hands and your arms. I want you to come to my palace, and I want you to do that in my palace. What? Do it in my palace? But you don't have a farm in your palace. He says, don't worry. Who needs the farm? Here you're sitting in the sun, beating down on you, you're schwitzing. I'll give you a room, and I want you to walk around and do whatever you're doing over here. Just do it in this room, because I enjoy watching you. I want to watch you from my palace. Just walk around, just make as if I'm farming my field. Yeah, just make believe. I don't care. I don't need an actual farm. I just want to see you. The farmer says, okay, it's a little bit of a weird request, but you know what? It's going to pay well. So the king says, don't worry, we'll find somebody else to manage your farm. You come with me to my palace, and we'll get started. The farmer comes. He's very, very excited about his new gig. He does it. He walks around the room like an idiot. He's farming this empty room with his hoe, with his shovel, whatever he's doing. After an hour, he comes to the king and says, I quit. You quit? Why are you quitting? I'm paying you so much money. He says, I just can't do this anymore. This is ridiculous. The king says, nah, don't worry. I'll pay you double. Go back. Don't worry. I'll pay you double. All right. The guy goes back. 30 minutes later, the guy comes out and says, King, I apologize. I truly appreciate this opportunity. The money you're offering me is truly exciting and tempting, and I'd love to take it, but I just can't do this anymore. The king says, why not? The king says, I don't understand you. You are standing in your field for hours. You're not eating. You're not drinking. You're sweating. The sun's being down on you. It's hard work cutting and moving through your field. Over here, I give you a beautiful room in the palace, temperature controlled. You're indoors. You have shade. You have endless food and drink. I'm paying you so well. And it's easier because you're not actually cutting anything. You just... Why? This is so much easier. He says, I know, king, but I'm doing nothing. I'm not doing anything. I just can't do it anymore. It was just too demoralizing. Just can't do it. I'm not doing anything. The Alter says we have to understand. We're doing Yiddishkeit. But what are we doing? What are we doing? If the whole Judaism was just tradition, no, you're not doing anything. Right? A Judaism is all about preserving what we did in the past. That's not a Judaism that's going to give anybody an exciting feeling. Right? We're doing something. We're actually doing something. The Alter says we have to understand what that is. Let's give ourselves the understanding of why is Judaism? Why is that ground zero of Judaism? I'm putting on tefillin and this is what it's all about. I'm not just doing some interesting tradition or ritual. What ritual? These are not Jewish words. We're doing something real. What are we doing? This is the question of the Alter Rebbe. How's that for a question? We're doing good? It's a critical question. This is a very important question. We have to understand the value of our Judaism. Question number 2. What's the value of the Beinoni? We are all a Beinoni. Meaning, 98%, I don't know if that's an exact figure, right? But everybody besides the top 2%, we are all souls that were created. It's called souls of the Beinoni. And a soul of a Beinoni is a soul who is destined to never be able to overcome the presence, the existence, and the influence. Well, let's call it the presence of the animal soul. A tzaddik is a rare breed of souls. Only 1% of souls are tzaddik. Really a lot less than 1%, but a tiny percent of souls are souls which are so powerful that they could be born in a human body just like us, and they have an animal soul, and they have a yetzer hara, and they have inner negativity, and they have inner, they have that selfishness and negativity of the animal soul, the yetzer hara. They have that inner beast. But they could overcome it. They could literally transform themselves to become saintly people through and through. The temptations, the weaknesses that we all suffer from, every human suffers from, they don't have it. They've somehow rid themselves of that. Which is, I'm sure, a very beautiful life. And that's a very fulfilling life. It's a very accomplished life. You were born as a regular human being, and somehow you've climbed the ladder of success, of spiritual success, and you somehow transformed yourself to become a saint, to become a tzaddik, to become somebody who's through and through holy and pure, and you don't suffer from all that selfishness and lowliness that we all suffer from. But a Beinoni can never do that. Our souls are beautiful souls, but our souls don't have the strength to ever somehow face the fight with the animal soul and to weaken the animal soul and to even get rid of the negativity. We'll never get rid of the negativity. It's always going to be there. We were born with the negativity of our animal soul, and we're going to die with the negativity of our animal soul. The Yetzer Hara is present when you're 3 years old, and it's present when you're 115 years old. That's the way it works. And the author is going to ask a question. Why then did God send our souls down here to earth? If we can never really create that spiritual internal transformation to become unbelievably better people, to fundamentally change who we are from the insides, then what's life all about? We're just here to survive? That's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to hold back our animal soul from taking over the ship, from hijacking the ship. And we're trying to stop the animal soul from exerting its influence to get us to do things which are maybe not the best things to do, and to say things that are not the best things to do, and to think things that are not the best things to do. But at the end of the day, the animal soul is always there. And we're never going to win against the animal soul. The best we can do is damage control. The best we can do is try to handle the situation. The best we can do is survive. And then what happens? We live for 120 years, and then what happens? We die. And then what happens? Can we show up and say, God, we faced the fight, we won, we made some tactical advantages? Nothing. So what's the point of the Beinoni? Let's read the words of the Alter Rebbe, and you really see the emotion of the Alter Rebbe really coming forth over here in these words. Let's read. What's the value of the Beinoni? Says the Alter Rebbe, we also need to understand, or at least get some inkling. What is the point behind creating the Beinoni? Why did God make a Beinoni? Why did their souls have to descend into this world to invest themselves within an animal soul of Klip and Sitra Achra? God's taking a beautiful soul, and the soul up in heaven is beautiful, it's holy, it's in the best place. And then God takes this soul, throws it down, not just in a world, but directly within the environment, and it has to be invested within an animal soul, inside this environment of Klip and Sitra Achra. Why would God do that to the soul? The Alter Rebbe says, after all, they will never be able to get rid of the animal soul their entire life. We'll never get rid of the animal soul. So God takes a soul, throws it in to be with an animal soul. So if you could tame the animal soul, then that's a wonderful accomplishment. And I could see why there's value in taking a soul, putting the soul in a challenging situation, but the soul emerges victorious. But the Beinoni, what happens to the Beinoni? God throws it to live with an animal soul, to be stuck with an animal soul their entire life, and the Beinoni can't help the situation. Continues the Alter Rebbe, they won't even be able to dislodge it. The Beinoni can't dislodge the animal soul from its place in the left ventricle of the heart, so that its fantasies will stop rising from there into their brain. He can't even compromise the standing and the power of the animal soul at all. Why not? Says the Alter Rebbe, the problem, as we explained many times, is that in the Beinoni, the raw core essence of the animal soul remains just as firmly entrenched and powerful as it was at birth, right? The animal soul at its core never changes. The Beinoni just can't do it. The only thing that the Beinoni can accomplish is that the animal soul's external trappings, as it dresses itself in thoughts, in words and in actions, none of that ever manages to play out freely within the person due to their self-mastery. But the beast is never transformed. Oh, so the Beinoni can make the best of the situation. The Beinoni can do a little bit of damage control. The Beinoni can try to control the situation. Not to ever let the animal soul get dominance and get a form of expression within practical life. But at the end of the day, God's taking a soul of a Beinoni, throwing it to live within an animal soul, and 120 years later, what did he accomplish? The soul survived, but the soul didn't create any change in the animal soul. And if so, says the Alter Rebbe, why is the Beinoni alive? Says the Alter Rebbe, and here I feel the Alter Rebbe's emotions coming through. Says the Alter Rebbe, if so, for what purpose did their souls descend to this world? Why is the Beinoni here in this world? To toil in vain, God forbid? To struggle their entire lives with the Yetzer Hara that they will never beat? This is a difficult question. What are we doing here? God just simply wants me to somehow, right, run through the gauntlet? Is that how you say it, right? And what, survive? For what? Why is God doing this to me? Taking my soul, forcing me to live with an animal soul. And that's my whole life. My whole life I'm struggling. I'm trying to survive every single day. And then what? Nothing. That's life. These are the two questions. These are two powerful questions, no? Okay. The author is going to use these two questions to jump into an unbelievable, lengthy, and deep, fundamental understanding. We have to get a whole new understanding of the power of the action of Yiddishkeit. And when it comes to action, we're all the same. Even the greatest tzaddik, shaking a lulav, any Jew could shake a lulav. Okay, to get into an emotional, spiritual space, the way a tzaddik could somehow connect with the divine, with God. Okay, that I don't even know what that looks like. None of us could relate to that. But a mitzvah we could all do. So could a Beinoni reach some form of level of spiritual experience and spiritual accomplishment like a tzaddik? No. But we could all do a mitzvah. And the author is going to totally reshape our understanding of that, of the idea of the mitzvahs that we could do, and to understand why that's so important. And why that is actually the purpose of why we exist. But let's learn. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Says the Alter Rebbe, let the following be their consolation. The following ideas we're going to learn is going to console all of us. It's going to give us strength. A double consolation to pick them up and provide them with inner happiness. Consolation so that they can celebrate how God resides with them in their Torah study and in their work for Him. Oh, okay. Here the Alter Rebbe gives us a little bit of a spoiler, how God resides with them in their Torah study and their work for Him. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's begin the study. The Alter Rebbe's answer is not going to be a one-line answer. The Alter Rebbe is now going to take us into a big subject. Part 2 of the chapter, page 259, Fuel for Your Flame. Fuel for your flame. Says the Alter Rebbe, but first, let's examine the words of the prodigious child in a passage from the Zohar, Parshas Balak. On the verse, the eyes of the wise person are in his head. The Alter Rebbe says, let's go to a passage from the Zohar. And in the Zohar, the classic book of Jewish mysticism, there's a quote there from a child. Now, why would the most deepest, mystical, esoteric book of Judaism quote a child? Interesting. A prodigious child. This was the son of Rav Hamnuna Sava, one of the great sages of the times of the Mishnah. Lived in northern Israel. And the Talmud tells us that in the days of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great sage, even children were studying and fluent in the teachings of Kabbalah. And this child, sometimes there were some very, very special ideas that this wisdom came to us specifically through children. And the sages recognized a true piece of wisdom, and they recorded it in the Zohar. So this is quoting very interesting. We're quoting from a child over here. A child is the one who shared the following teaching. And the child's teaching is on the verse from King Solomon. King Solomon writes this in Ecclesiastes, I love the sound of that word, Ecclesiastes. In Hebrew, it's Kohelet. The eyes of the wise person are in his head. The eyes of the wise person are in his head. Now, dear friends, have you ever heard of this verse before? The eyes of the wise are in his head? What do you think it means, by the way? Before we read this passage, what does that mean? Like, if you read this, well, it's a verse from the scripture. What's the meaning of it? Any ideas?
Maybe that they're also in the head of everyone else. That the wise one is not special, that his eyes are inside his head.
Uh-huh.
Maybe there's a connection with the brain to the eyes. The eyes see and the brain interprets. And
No, but what's the idea? Meaning, if you think about it, all of us have eyes in our head. Who doesn't? Like, what stupid people have their eyes where in their armpits?
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so what does it mean that the wise person, oh, he's wise, his eyes are in his head? Oh, really? No kidding me.
That you have to think about what you're doing, like as opposed to the wisdom is not in your heart, but in your head.
So in the English, it a little bit gets lost, but Elke, I think, is touching it a little bit. What the verse means on a simple level is that a wise person, he's seeing ahead. Meaning he's using his head, his mind, to look with his eyes. Which means foolish people, they're just living in the moment. They're not seeing consequences. They're not seeing the long term. They're not seeing 10 steps ahead. A wise person, he has his eyes in his head. He has a deep look. He's looking far ahead. All right, this is the simple meaning of the verse. But this child in the Zohar is going to give us a deeper interpretation of this verse. King Solomon says the eyes of the wise person are in his head. What does that mean? Okay, so let's see over here. This is what it means. Okay. Let's begin the quote. Bottom page 259 from the Zohar. Where else could a person's eyes be? King Solomon is telling us the eyes are in the head. Yeah, where else would the eyes be? Rather, obviously, page 260, obviously, there is another meaning here. And this must be it. Here is the meaning of the verse. And we'll understand the meaning of the verse by going to a teaching from the Talmud. We learned that a man should not walk more than 4 cubits with his head uncovered. This is the idea. It's in the Talmud. Our sages tell us there's a law that a Jewish man needs to wear a kippah or any head covering, but a Jew has to wear a head covering. You should not walk 4 cubits without a covering on the head. Why not? Continues the Zohar. What's the reason? Because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests over his head. Every single Jew is always walking around with the Shekhinah, the divine presence, resting upon a Jew. And because of that, you need to always cover your head. So continues the Zohar. So every wise person has his mind and all his concerns in his head, meaning on that which rests continually over his head. Now that's the meaning of the verse. A wise person knows what's in his head, knows what's on his head. He knows that the Shekhinah, God's presence, rests upon your head. A wise person is somebody who pays attention to that. His eyes, meaning not literally, but figuratively, his attention, his focus. Where's he looking? He's not wasting his time. He's not getting sidetracked. He's in tune. He's focused on the idea that God's presence is upon me. And that's the meaning of the verse. Continues the Zohar. Once his eyes are there, once you're focused on your head, once you're focused on the idea that you have the divine presence upon your head, he will realize that this light that's a flame above his head needs oil. If it's a flame, you need oil. Right? Every flame needs oil. You see, the body of a person is a wick with a flame burning at the top. Here we have a metaphor. We have a flame. In order for a flame to be present, it has to hold on to something. What does a flame hold on to? It holds on to it, grasps the wick. So the flame of the divine presence, the light of the divine presence needs a wick. The body is the wick. But a flame and a wick is not enough. What else do you need? Oil. That's why King Solomon cried out, never be lacking oil on your head, for this flame on your head needs oil. Oh. King Solomon warns us, you got a flame. Feed the flame. Make sure that flame always has oil. A Jew has God resting upon him, but don't neglect that. You got to feed that bond. You need to feed that presence. You need to feed that flame. Make sure that God is there. What's the oil? Says the Zohar, the oil is the person's good deeds. The mitzvahs that we do, that is the flame, that is the fuel that fuels God's presence in our life. Do we want to have God resting upon us? The oil that allows that flame to burn upon us is the good deeds we do. Concludes the Zohar, this is what the verse means when it says the eyes of the wise person are in his head. A wise person knows that he has to pay attention to the presence of God upon his head, and he makes sure to do good deeds. It's like that there's fuel for his flame. This concludes the citation from the Zohar. Let's analyze this analogy a little bit. Every single candle, every single lantern needs 3 ingredients. Number 1, you need fire. But fire can't exist on its own. So it needs to hold on to something. What's it going to hold on to? A wick. But if you just have fire in a wick, the fire is not going to stick around for too long. It's going to quickly burn up the wick, and the fire is gone. So you need to have flame. You need to have fuel. What's the fuel? The oil. Those are the 3 ingredients. Says the Alter Rebbe, let's think about this analogy for the Jew. We have a flame, the flame of God that's resting upon us, the divine presence upon a Jew. The wick that is holding down that fire is our body, is our physical life. But the wick is not enough. That's just a tool that allows the flame to take hold. But what actually fuels the presence and the continuous presence of the flame? The mitzvahs we do. So what allows God's presence to be in our life? A mitzvah. The Alter is going to ask a question. And it's a very important question. It's a big question. Let's read. Bottom page 260. Says the Alter Rebbe, let's examine this metaphor. It compares the light of the Shekhinah to the light of a lamp. The flame does not shine and take hold to the wick without oil. Right? A flame is not going to work if there's no oil. So too, the Shekhinah does not rest over the body of a person, which is like a wick, unless that person does good deeds. This is the idea. Ask the Alter Rebbe, page 261, why the emphasis on good deeds specifically? You have a soul, which is a piece of God from above. Why can't that act as a fuel for the wick? Oh, this is a great question. We need mitzvahs. I have a soul. I can generate spiritual connection with my soul. I can get emotionally invested. I can feel love and awe, and I can get him. I have a soul. I have a godly soul. Is my soul not enough to build my connection with God? Says the Zohar, no. Only a mitzvah could be the fuel that brings God's energy, God's flame into your life. Why not the soul, says the Alter Rebbe. You see how we're starting to inch into the answer? This is the Alter Rebbe starting to put the ideas on the table. We don't have any answers yet, but the Alter Rebbe set us up for the answer. We're going to stop here. Next week is a very, very big, deep idea. The soul cannot really create that bond with God. Only a mitzvah. But okay. Big stuff coming up with that. That's a cliffhanger, right? We got a big question, no answer? We'll stop here for tonight.